to the FanDuel wide receiver analysis for Week 13. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Italy 42. Taking a look at cash and GPP wideouts this week, and a lot of different range of options you can go with. No real surprise when I opened this up to see Mike Evans leading the list because, one, there's probably no one happier last week than you because he just dominated what's supposedly, one of the best secondaries in the league, and 2 touchdowns in the first half.
I was disappointed he didn't get 8 touchdowns because he had 2 in the first quarter. And if Jameis Winston wasn't so freaking terrible, then he could have just kept going all day. I mean, and I was happy to see that he did burn Sherman on one of those touchdowns. The second one, he gets no credit for it. But, I mean, Evans gets credit for it. Sherman doesn't. But, I mean, it's another good spot for him. Low team total because the quarterback's horrible. But Mike Evans is going to see a ton of targets. I mean, he's got 10 more targets than anybody else in football, and rightfully so because he's the only legitimate weapon in the passing game. Cameron Brate's the guy that is seeing some love for this week, but I don't think I can go down that route. But, in a game that's supposed to be competitive, they're underdogs in this one against the Chargers. Their defense has been playing well, but that's not to say that I don't think the Chargers will still score points. So, Evans – was he the third most expensive wide receiver on the board this week? San Diego's below average against number ones. And, Evans, he's been alternating 2 touchdown and no touchdown games. Well, I guess not alternating. He had 2 in a row with no touchdowns. But he's got that 2 touchdown upside. He's done it 3 times this year, 10 touchdowns in 11 games. I mean, you just know he's a safe option to get 12-plus targets. It's just whether or not those targets are going to be anywhere near where he's actually standing because Jameis Winston is just an embarrassment.
Yeah, I mean, I think double-digit targets is pretty much a lock for Evans week in and week out at this point. And as you point out, I mean, Chargers 18th against wide receiver ones. They've been okay, but obviously Mike Evans is just a mismatch for basically any corner just because of his size.
Yeah, and they've been sneaky good against the run too. I mean, they've been tough to run on. So Doug Martin has looked okay since he's come back, but I don't expect him to have a big game. So, they might rely on Evans even more this week. And, I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, last week, like you said, I could talk about it all day, but he made some ridiculous catches.
Yeah, no, he definitely did. Michael Thomas, still surprisingly under 7K. I mean, he's near a lot of the other Saints wide receivers in terms of pricing, but has been pretty much the most consistent option really over the last, 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he got a couple 2 touchdown games. Had one last week. I think the other one was 3 weeks back, or 4 weeks back against San Francisco. That one, I mean, not surprising. It's about as easy of a matchup as you're going to get. But I mean, aside from the week against Denver, which we'll let it slide. Obviously, that's the toughest matchup in the league for wide receivers. 4 for 40. Also had 2 fumbles. We'll pretend that game didn't happen. But outside of that, I mean, he's been very good. Struggled a little bit against Seattle, 6 for 63, but once again, if you're not Mike Evans, you kind of get a pass for that game there. So playing the Superdome again against the Lions team that, Football Outsiders ranks dead last against the pass. Another one of those kind of subjective things. I don't know if they're dead last, but they are terrible in general against everybody and on defense. So I don't think that the Saints will score 49 points, but you and I were talking about it on the first pod. Don't be surprised if they sail way over that total, just under 30 points. I mean, Breeze looks tremendous right now. That offense, I mean, they have to win. I still don't think they'll make the playoffs, but it's not an impossibility for them right now if they get hot. And, I mean, that offense certainly is hot right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. And a really nice, price and kind of points per dollar bargain. GPP wideouts, 9K Odell Beckham. And, I mean, this was a good spot, and I think this is going to be a game where I feel like it sets up for a monster upside, but as we all know, there's monster failure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing that's been with Beckham this year. If you've got him on the right weeks, you've cashed in big. But if you pay up for him on the wrong weeks, I mean, he could kill your lineup at 9K. I mean, you get a guy like Antonio Brown that's right about that same exact price, who is a much safer option. And, I mean, obviously he has upside as well. But, Beckham, we saw 5 for 49 against the Rams. We saw 5 for 46 against the Bears. 3 for 23 against Minnesota. I mean, he's had some really bad games. And crazy thing is he's only had 100 yards in 2 different games this year. So, I think after last week's big game, he'll have higher ownership than I'd like for him to have this week in a GPP. But, I mean, he does have that big-time upside. Giants still they're not going to win the division. Let's be honest. Cowboys don't seem like they're ever going to lose, but they're still battling for playoff positioning, and they could still end up, making a run for a top 2 spot, really, if they can win a couple more games, because, Seattle's probably the team they're battling with for that, and they looked horrible last week. So as weird as it sounds, all of a sudden the NFC East that was terrible last couple seasons could end up with 2 of the top teams in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, you look at New York. I mean, you put them in any other division, they're the number one. They're number one team in that division. It just shows how Dallas has been. Obviously Washington's been competitive. Um, yeah, OBJ. I mean, I think in terms of if you think Pittsburgh's going to be up big, in which they probably should be given big beggings, numbers at home. That puts OBJ in a good spot to kind of just get the garbage time or play keep up, and obviously that means force fed targets for him.
Yeah, and I mean this is probably the game of the week, right? I mean you look at all these other matchups, like most years Seattle Carolina would be the game, but this year kind of lost its luster a little bit because Carolina is terrible. Like if there's one game I want to watch this week, especially because my team's horrible, like this is the game I want to watch. I mean Detroit New Orleans will be fun to watch, but do you really care? I don't. I mean this is the game that I want to watch that actually has playoff implications.
Yeah, this one's a big one. This one's going to be fun. Yeah, primetime game there at 4:25 or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's going to be juicy. Tyrell Williams, 6,600, facing the Bucks. And, I mean, this is a guy I didn't really have much high hopes for last week. And, he proved me wrong. But dude's an absolute stud.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 weeks now in a row that he scored a touchdown. Had that game, 125 yards against Miami. Last week, we talked about that Houston pass defense is pretty tough. Had 14 targets, caught 8 of them, but 70 yards and a touchdown. Had a good game against Tennessee. They said he's dealing with a shoulder injury. He didn't practice on Thursday, but they said he was out on the field to start practice today. I don't know how much he's going to practice. Obviously, practice is still going on right now as far as Friday. But he said he's got a right shoulder labrum issue, but he also had that same issue when he was a senior in college, and I guess it didn't affect him a ton. He's still able to play, so he's easily the number 1 target for Phillip Rivers. Dontrell Inman has those random big games, but I mean there aren't many passing options for this team right now with everybody hurt. So you got the tight ends, and you pretty much got Tyrell Williams. So looks like hopefully he'll be out there, and if he doesn't play, I mean you give Inman a bump up, but he's the guy I'm less excited about it though.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of red zone production, obviously Williams dominates that over Inman. Inman can have those breakout games, but Williams is definitely the guy. Value wideouts here. Golden Tate really cheap in a game where it sets up to be a good Golden Tate week. I feel like. I mean, targets have been there of late, and a good matchup against New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Rams receivers having some big games last week. Obviously, you're going to be passing a ton against the Saints because they're going to be scoring points. You got to be playing catch up. Detroit, we mentioned their defense not very good. So Golden Tate, I mean, really you could look to any of these lines. We saw Bolden have a big game on Thanksgiving. For some reason, he's not a guy I'm expecting to have multiple big games in a row. But, Tate is a guy who has 9 or more targets in 4 of his last 6 games, 7 in all but one of those. Like we said, matchups don't get much better than the Saints here. And Lions with Theo Riddick still banged up, that running game's still been inconsistent. I mean, if I'm going to get a piece of this offense and I only get one, it's going to be a wide receiver for sure.
Yeah, definitely. This one here, Tyreek Hill, I mean, obviously coming off a monster game where he didn't necessarily even do it on offense. It was, special teams and but targets. I mean, this guy's been, heavily used, him and Kelsey with Macklin out.
Yeah, I mean, he's been so good. I mean, probably the worst name in the NFL. I mean, Hill, nothing wrong with the name Hill, of course, nothing you can do about that. But I mean, literally put the word reek in his name. I mean, I want to have a conversation with his parents about that one. But, I mean, what was it? Last week he had a free kick return for touchdown, an end around, caught a touchdown pass. Obviously, he's probably never going to have a game like that again in his life. But for $5,800, a game against the Falcons, this is a Chiefs offense that really hasn't been very good this year, especially with, Jamal Charles essentially not really playing at all. Spencer Ware missing sometimes. So it's a good spot for him where I almost hope that Macklin does come back because Macklin hasn't been very good even when he's played this year. So maybe that'll keep his ownership a little bit lower. And it seems like Alex Smith is excited to finally have a guy he can actually rely on in that passing game.
Yeah, and I think, you're looking at this game too. It kind of sets up for Chiefs are going to have to, not air it out, but they are going to have to put a little bit more emphasis on trying to move the ball down the field in less than 4 yards at a time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and he seems like, outside of Kelsey, really the only decent threat down the field. So I'm definitely a big fan there.
Yeah, me too. So, that's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel wide receiver analysis for Week 13. If you want to check out Justin's article, you can head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. It's up now. Be sure to check out the rest of our Week 13 content.